The Green Party and this campaign provide you a vehicle for doing just that. The cynic says you can't fight City Hall. The Green Party says, never mind fighting it, let's take it over. Our approach to the budget, education, and the economy demonstrate this. The reason why we seemingly can't afford to pay for higher education and the other things we need to do to create a healthy economy is not because the money isn't there. It's not because Illinois is too poor to afford it. Illinois is an agricultural, financial, and economic powerhouse. If we were an independent nation, we'd have the 27th largest economy in the world. The real problem is that we have one of the worst, most regressive tax systems in the United States. And despite this being factually demonstrated to both Democratic and Republican legislators and the last several governors repeatedly in Springfield, they have stubbornly refused to do anything to fix it. Instead, they have made the problem far worse by trying to balance the budget, by cheating the pension system for years, using gimmicks and temporary one-time fixes like fund sweeps, user fee increases, and sales of state assets, borrowing more money, and most recently, as I just talked about in the Quinn budget, by simply refusing to pay its bills on time and enacting the very devastating cuts to education and vital social services that the advocates of less government have been clamoring for. They kept delaying the problem to the future for future General Assemblies to deal with, and that future is now here. The only new revenue streams they seem to approve of are more gambling and more alcohol and tobacco taxes, which especially impact the poor, as if we might somehow smoke and drink and gamble our way to fiscal health. Now, as inviting a prospect as that admittedly sounds, it is patently unrealistic. It is no secret what is wrong with our tax system and what must be done to fix it. I have repeatedly pointed out that when all taxes in Illinois, sales, income, property, local taxes, fees, etc., are all combined, the lowest income Illinoisans are being taxed at a rate more than double the rate of the top 1%. This is what we mean by a regressive system. It's fundamentally backwards. You're taxing the people least able to pay instead of the people most able to pay. But actually, I just learned that that needs correction, and I'm going to give you a little more ammunition here. According to this report that came out just a few months ago by the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, who pays a distributional analysis of the tax system in all 50 states, I have to amend that system. In Illinois, if you want to get this publication and turn to page 42, you find that when you combine all Illinois taxes and look at the total picture, we tax the bottom 20% of Illinoisans at more than triple the rate of the top 1%. This in a state that has the highest percentage of people with an aggregation of wealth of $5 million or more. We're taxing the poor people. Now, some people say, well, you don't want to tax the rich too much because then you'll drive them out of state and you might not create enough jobs and all that sort of thing. But that is not Illinois' problem. We are already looking at particularly the income tax, a low tax state. Of the majority of states with an income tax, our 3% top rate, it's a flat rate 3%, is the lowest of the 39 states that have some kind of income tax. We rely far too heavily on local property taxes to fund our schools, which has a regressive impact, and we provide the lowest percentage of funding for schools from the state of any state in the United States, which has given us the most unequal schools in the United States between richest and poorer districts. So, how do we solve this problem? Well, you'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to stand up here and read to you my 20-page paper, okay? I'm not going to do that, but let me just highlight a few things for you. Basically, what I advocate here is a 6-point plan for how we can fix the structural budget deficit but make our tax system more progressive and fair, and not only dig us out of that $13 billion structural deficit hole, but actually raise the additional revenue we need to do the things we need to do as a society and start creating a healthier economy in Illinois. First of all, we do need to eliminate some spending. Not spending to colleges and universities, not spending to K through 12 schools, not spending to essential social services. There is some waste in the budget. Now, where I disagree with the folks in the Republican Party and the right who think that we can simply cut spending to balance a $13 billion deficit, which is patently unrealistic, I think that we need to be taking a more surgical approach to the problem rather than a meat cleaver approach to the problem, which is frankly what we're experiencing right now, and it's not working out so well for us. But there are some good ideas out there for eliminating waste. There are parts of the budget where we know that there's too much administrative overhead, too much waste, programs that aren't really serving the people. So I actually borrowed an idea from one of my former Republican opponents, Adam Andrzejewski, the idea of a forensic budget. If elected, I would convene a citizens commission with subpoena power to conduct a forensic audit of the budget, meaning that they would go through line by line and not simply ask, well, was the money spent where it was supposed to, but is this really serving a legitimate public interest? In addition, we also need to look at the recently passed capital bill, that $45 billion monstrosity that has certain parts of it that really weren't about getting our economy back and running and creating more jobs. There was an awful lot of waste in the capital budget, and that's where a lot of the pork lies. As a matter of fact, my friend Rob Sherman in the Green Party and I are actually looking very soon at filing a lawsuit against portions of the budget which unconstitutionally are going to religious institutions. And we discovered in examining the capital budget that there are quite a few appropriations that just happen to go to religious institutions on which certain state legislators happen to sit on the board of directors. We found that this is probably not coincidental. So that's just one illustration of some of the kinds of things that are in the capital bill that weren't about putting Illinoisans back to work. They were about paying political favors. I believe that with a green in government, without any kind of stake in the system of political patronage and pay to play, that we could take a fresh set of citizens' eyes on both the operational budget and the capital budget, and I believe we could find about $2 billion worth of savings between the two to help us meet our budget gap. Secondly, we need to enact a comprehensive reform of our existing tax structure. I support the approach that's found both in House Bill 174 and Senate Bill 750. You can read more about those at the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability website. The details are also in my paper. But basically what it does is it does involve an income tax increase. But unlike Governor Quinn, you can't just talk about an income tax increase in a vacuum. It has to be part of a whole package, like the school and budget reform movement has been fighting for in this state for years. It's not just an income tax increase. You have to provide protections for lower and middle income class earners so that they're not actually paying the higher tax in order to make our system more progressive. You also have to provide property tax relief to the people as part of the package, and you have to give voters some assurance that this extra revenue that you're raising is going to be going to our schools. Senate Bill 750 does this. It guarantees that the funding stream that's being raised, a portion of it will go to funding our K through 12 schools at the recommended foundation level, what's called the EFAB, Education Funding Advisory Board recommended level, so that we start to lift up the poorest schools. And it also devotes another $300 million to higher education, which starts to move us toward the right goal that I was talking about earlier of making higher education affordable and eventually free. So that's step two. Step three, impose a financial transactions tax on speculative trading, sometimes called the Tobin tax. This is an idea that goes back to John Maynard Keynes. Nobel Prize-winning economist James Tobin talked about it. Even Lawrence Summers talked about it some years ago, although he's kind of dropped the idea now. Economists like Dean Baker are advocating it today.